controversial subjects with the facts can be tense, but we are a sub-science here to make things make sense.
Okay. This might be, I don't think it has to be a crazy intense conversation, but I think it's like obviously we're both pro-choice. And I'm curious how many people who listen to our podcast are not. And honestly, like when I first started prepping for this episode, I was thinking like, oh yeah, we're just gonna like ream into that and be so pissed. But then I was like, maybe there are some people who listen to this that are pro-life that I would that would be sort of like reachable. Do you know what I mean? I don't know. Like in terms of like having that honest conversation that's not just focused on being like, how are these people so crazy?
Well, okay,
I don't know.
like, okay, I think that's not the right approach. I don't think it's ever the right approach to be like angry and say that people are crazy. And I think even just being like Christian fundamentalists are like, I even think that can sometimes be like a hyperbolic way of staying mad. Like as like a queer person, it's so easy to go to these like extreme people and say they represent so many more. I think like from what a lot of the research I was doing was realizing that there are people who are pro-life who then end up in a situation where they need to have an abortion and still sometimes say that they are pro-life because they're like, if my circumstances were different, I wouldn't have had, like, I didn't want to do this.
Yeah.
And then also, like, this recent study I read said that only 19% of people in America think that abortion should be illegal firmly.
Yeah.
Like, so there's a
Mine
lot
was
of
14.8% are consistently pro-life through the years.
But that's what I think. I think pro-life and pro-choice are very binary terms for something that a lot of people probably fall on a spectrum because it's a really complicated issue.
That is what. So like 43.8%, this is in America, are consistently pro-choice, 14.8 are consistently pro-life, and the rest are context-dependent views. So that's only really filling like, 60% of the spectrum, with the rest being like, I have like maybe a varying opinion.
Pro-life is a weird term because it's like we're about to explain to you how so many people are going to die because of this.
I think
It's not
that's
a fair
where
term.
the anger comes from. And also, like...
Right? Or I don't know. I just thought about that. Is no one
100%? Like if that's what a lot of the arguments from people who are supporting even just like these programs is not only because they're tied up in sex education and they're like linked with access to education and healthcare and these kinds of things. Like it's frustrating when you look at so many stats that show abortion bans or restrictions do more damage to life often than the help that people are acting like they do. And we'll go through some of those.
Well, one thing I will say is that when I was like learning science actually in high school, and I remember learning about like the egg hitting, the sperm hitting the egg. me really trying we'd be like pro women. I'm like, the egg does all the work. It moves towards the sperm. The sperm doesn't even move. No, that's one thing the sperm does is it moves. But and then like the zygote and how the cells sort of start to proliferate and fold in on themselves and like create like your asshole first because your deuteral cells and whatever. And like by the definition of quote unquote life, that isn't life because like life, it needs to be able to survive on its own, have a metabolism, all these things that like zygote doesn't have. But I remember thinking like, oh my God, like I'm pro-life. Like I had this
that time.
Or I don't even want to say pro-life. It's the wrong thing. Yeah, like in high school, just being like, wait a second, abortions are bad. Like I just remember having that thought because I was learning about the science of a sperm, egg, whatever. It was only when I started to in university like investigate in a course about how integral abortions are to saving women's lives, how in places like America, like all the talking points we're about to talk about, that I started to go, oh my God. Okay, I'm pro-choice. Right. Like, I just want to empathize, but like, it's, you know what I mean? Like, it's not fair to just come in and be like, it's so crazy that you're pro-life. Because
I don't, and that's not what I meant to say. I think I meant like coming from the angry side of thinking of these people who like picket Planned Parenthoods and harass
Yeah,
people.
yeah, it's
Like,
crazy.
obviously, it's easy to come in with a lot of anger. And
Yeah.
all I meant was thinking of our audience and thinking of, I know the people that often like enjoy our content, and even our friends and family like have similar political views. And
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
easy to come together sometimes and be like, yeah, fuck those people.
Yeah.
But then it occurred to me, like, there probably is like if lots of Americans listen to this podcast, 40% of people are like context dependent. And I'm sure like most people kind of are context dependent, right? Like that is the whole point of pro-choice though, in my mind, right?
Yeah.
Like that it's like, it is context dependent, and there's often like a lot of views around who this boogie woman is that's like making these decisions, and that they've just been like careless and reckless, and they're just like
awful.
their form of plan B is abortion. Like there's all these ideas that is not definitely true of everyone who is quote unquote pro-life, but like often are thrown out there like, this is a punishment, you must have this child.
Yeah. But my point was more like, it takes time, it takes effort to understand the clear reason why abortions being legal are so important. Like it's not as obvious, it's not as simple. Right. It's like with so many of these conversations, it's like, yeah, if you just want to like have the like clearest wrong answer so you can live your life freely, like sure, go with it, but the actual truth is
like
much
the
more
extrapolated
complicated
implication that falls out from banning abortions is maybe much greater than some people are willing to like talk about or think about.
So that's what we're gonna talk about,
and it's so much easier to just talk about like the singular cell form or life
just being like exactly,
because objectively, like, I know what you're saying. Most people are like, like death and killing is not good. Yeah. And like when you only start from that as your whole point of opinion, then of course that's what you think.
Well, the first thing was just that abortions, regardless of whether they're legal or illegal, are going to happen. It is like, there's been countless studies on this. There's been studies of countries where abortions are illegal, where abortions are legal, and there's very little difference, in many cases no difference, between those countries of whether it's legal or illegal. The only thing that changes is the amount of unsafe abortions that happen and the amount of women that die. So to me, that was one of the first times where I was like, okay, I so clearly understand where I fall, because of course no one is saying that like abortions are these amazing things, right? But it's a part of life. It's a part of the societies that we live in. They're going to happen, and we've built our whole entire lives around the fact that these things are going to happen. And we understand also, in obvious cases, how much of the time it is not the woman's fault, how much of the time it is the men's fault. And there's a lot of stats about that, about abusive relationships, about I'll get more into that later. The main thing I think to take away is just that this isn't going to change how many abortions are going to happen in America. Right. All it's going to change is how many unsafe abortions there are and how many women are going to die. It's as simple as that for me when you actually look at the stats. And these are like pretty incredible studies all over the world. And it's just sad, because I think that's sort of for me like where like the conversation in many ways ends, because I understand that this is not trying to protect women. This is not trying to protect poor women. This isn't trying to protect life.
Like if that is the assumption. And I guess that's where people kind of talk about like a fetus is the easiest form of defending life, because you don't have to care about what their political beliefs are. You don't have to care about what they're going to grow up and do. Like they have no implication on society yet. That's people often, it's frustrating when you're like, you care about them until birth, and then after that you don't give a shit anymore. Like,
you mean because they're not interested in like social
child care, and like
any
providing like financial
care.
aid to parents, and like I don't know. There's just like so many ways in which caring about a fetus is the easiest way, because it's so non-offensive. It's literally a perfect being in your mind, versus caring about like a 16-year-old kid who like is troubled or whatever their background is. Like suddenly you don't care anymore, or even like a 5-year-old, right? Like,
or just like I don't want to give out like food stamps because poor people are lazy,
they deserve it. And it's like, well, that's all intertwined in this. If you're forcing people to have children who don't want to, for whatever reason, one of which may be financial stability, then you aren't supporting that child's life in the first place.
Yeah, it was, a quarter of people. This was only a study of 1,000 women. Okay. But 40% were saying that they were getting an abortion because they could not afford the child, and they thought if they had it, they wouldn't be able to survive. This is in America. So out of 1,000, this is a study of 1,000 people getting an abortion. We shouldn't say women because it's not, you can have a vagina and not be a woman. 1,000 people getting an abortion, 40% did not think that they could survive and look after the kid based on money. So it's like one reason. A third, again, of 1,000 people said it was due to partner related reasons. So like they didn't have a supportive partner or person in their life anymore who was like going to support them,
part of their
life.
And
And then in many of the cases was an abusive partner. So it's like, it's another frustrating situation where men just get to like, I don't even think I got to even have an opinion on this. Like men just get to sit back and watch this happen when they are a part of it, because a third of the people who were choosing to get abortions was because they were in an abusive relationship with someone. They now are in a situation where they're like, I cannot be tethered to this person. And then there was other studies just about how violence against women increases in places where they can't get abortions because they're now tethered to these men who are abusing them. Whereas then when they can get the abortion, they can cut off that relationship and they end up safer. So it's just like, it's just so frustrating how these conversations, like that sort of boogeyman women you said thing was so menacing, because it just takes the men out of this situation, which is so unfair that we live in like a world where there's such power and patriarchy in men, and then when it comes to this divisive issue that's so integral to everything, men just get to tap out and control women's bodies. It's like it's just like the laws of like, it's just unfair. Like it's just like, how is this fair? It's frustrating.
Like the government should be able to use that man's body for 9 months however they please.
Yeah. I know there's all those like,
obviously I'm just kidding in that sense, but it's just like, it does feel like men in these instances, and let's not like, also like there are lots of men who are supporting and want their wives to have abortions as well, and who are like victims to this issue as well, right? That lots of people are forced to have kids who just like otherwise would not have them. But lots of times I feel like men get to escape this responsibility that the boogie woman is forced to like maintain. Like she was promiscuous. If she didn't want to have a baby, they should have not been having sex. They should have been more careful. But it's like, well, then what is the man's responsibility in this? Why can they just like go off and be fine and not legally be bound to anything? If like a woman is forced to have an abortion, what is a man forced to do?
Fuck, now it's like, God, do we have to become lawyers? I'm kidding. We don't need more man lawyers. I'm kidding. Oh my God.
I thought it was interesting. One of the the strongest predictor for anti-abortion views is sexism and belief in traditional gender roles. So like other correlates, things that correlate strongly with, it's like the older you are, the more religious you are, the more conservative you are, the less likely you are to support abortion. But the strongest predictor of anti-abortion views is sexism and belief in traditional gender roles. But interestingly, the sexism part of it, rather than misogyny, it was benevolent sexism, like this belief that women should be cherished and protected. You know what I mean? It's not like always sexism, like men are thinking they're better than women. It's like the type of person who like has this benevolent sexist view.
Benevolent sexism.
Yeah, have you heard that before?
No. I'm like saying it over and over in my head because I'm like,
well, think of it like, because misogyny is often like, you know, like this almost awful treatment of women and believing that they're lesser than, but there's this kind of sexism that kind of uphold women to being a certain way. They're fragile and we need to protect them like we're knights in shining armor, and that's like a form, or can be a form of sexism as well. So I thought that was interesting. That
is interesting because I can see myself in those situations and being like, that feels fucking weird that the guy's acting like that, but I don't know how to put my finger on it. Because on the outside, benevolent sexism. Yeah, because like I've definitely been around misogynists, and it's really easy to be like, you're scary as fuck.
Exactly.
And like but then there's that other one where you're like, this is
sometimes
weird.
Like these beliefs, like sometimes the belief in these gender roles can, in their mind, be like a nice thing, a beautiful thing. But you're like, well, it's still like so intertwined in a structure that can like lock women and men into positions that are not necessarily.
And men, that's the thing. Like it's separate. But when we talk about sexism and all this toxic masculinity and all that stuff, it's like, the men are victim too, and we see it all the time.
And I
I'm
think
always
that it's like part of the big part here too, that men are victims too. And like obviously in the case of like having to have a pregnancy, the woman is like the victim. But it is like it's sad that we have to be like, men, you're victims too. You should care. You know what I mean? Like it's really sad.
Yeah.
Something that I found interesting, unless you were in the middle.
No. Go off, sis.
I'd come across a theory in political science because the question is like, if only 14.8% or whatever it was.
Mine was like from 2014, it was 19%.
So 19%, and I'm assuming that's America as well.
Yeah, 19% of America are saying that they're
pro-life, quote unquote.
No, they're saying that abortion should be illegal.
Oh, sorry. Okay. Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, then mine was using the terms pro-life. So
wow.
slightly different.
Okay.
But the question is like, why is it such a contentious issue, and how is the Supreme Court undoing all this progress if such a small percentage of people it's causing it is like wants it to be illegal?
Yeah, so you have information on that? Because I'm actually like, why?
So I came across some writing on this, and it was related to something called the power law, which describes how agendas are often set and how minorities, in this case maybe less than 20%, care an extreme amount about an issue, while the majority cares to a smaller degree. And as a result, that 20% puts in so many more resources into fighting this issue. So they protest more, they make more noise. It becomes a single issue voter or single issue voters, how you say that? They give away huge amounts of money. And so people compare this kind of issue similar to climate change. It's like lots of people care a little, but oil companies care a lot, that they can like make their profits and will do whatever it takes to stop the movement towards like a better world.
God.
And so that impacts obviously how laws get passed.
But what, through lobbying?
Well, if you think about like even movements for like women's rights, for the ability to vote, for all these things often are led by minority groups at the time. So it can be a great thing. Like it can be the beginning edge of a progressive movement. Often starts as small, but hopefully that tips over eventually. And then like most people believe that women should be able to vote.
I know, it's so crazy. Even the word progressive, like everyone's like, oh, like, bam, progressives. I'm like, progress.
Yeah, like, yeah.
Isn't that the whole point? Like, we're like, okay, like you just don't want to progress. Like, it's so weird. I've always found that like interesting. Like, because it's like conservative. You're trying to keep things the same. Like
status quo.
I mean, I just can't relate to that as a human, but I've also like, maybe I'm just like bad at empathizing, but I'm like, aren't those words like, don't you want to have progress? Like, I don't know. It's always confused me because I just always have assumed progress is good. But I think maybe some people truly think progress is
in
scary
their mind,
or bad.
or in their mind, it's not progress. Like it's not a progress.
Like they're like they shouldn't be called progressives because
perhaps,
they're not.
or I'm just maybe they believe in these values and their version of progress on those values is different. And you're right. Maybe it would just be like that's a word that I think is a misnomer.
But it feels like so much energy is going into stopping progress, which I find just really interesting because I'm like,
the thing that gives me at least hope. This doesn't make now easier for America or the rest of the world, which I think is facing a lot of similar issues, right? Like not just about abortion rights, but we're seeing like tons of political issues all over.
But even like about abortion rights, like
classes
in Poland, it happened.
Totally. It just like I feel like it's important to remind ourselves that like it took a lot of work and time to fight for these things in the first place. And yes, we had like a major decision made now, but we will just keep fighting back. And that's like not. I don't know how to describe it. It's just like knowing people literally fought for so long, even for gay marriage. You know what I mean? Like people went through and it created unions and created like organizations of people to go to Congress, to go fight and push for political change. And it takes a long time. And it's like, we can't let just this one decision deflate us and make us feel like it's over. We lost. It's like, no. You have to like find a way to fight and get that progress back. Like
and
progress,
I do see that starting to happen. You start to see like, I'm like now again trying to not read about America and learn about Canada, but I'm learning about how their political system works even more as people try to talk about how to like ensure that we keep women alive and safe in America. It's like, okay, like interesting because of course like what's at stake here is truly that women are just gonna die and poor women are gonna die and it's like tragic. So it's like, people are going to fight. And it is even interesting to see how in the last week, like, you see how people are starting to explain how politics works and how there are ways to change this, where I never thought I'd even have an understanding about how politics work that deeply, because I was just trying to like piece together what the people were even trying to say. So you're right. People are going to continue to make sure that large swaths of women don't die.
Yeah.
But what's really sad is that right now it's like, that's what's confusing. So like one thing that like I was reading about was just like ectopic pregnancies and just how they're really common. Like 1 in 100 pregnancies are ectopic, which means that the baby starts to develop in the fallopian tubes, mostly in the fallopian tubes rather than
in the uterus.
Yeah. And so it's really dangerous. And like to the
mother's life. Yeah.
Yeah. To both. Well yeah. 2 out of 4. So 2 to 4 out of 1,000 ectopic pregnancies result in death.
Okay.
In America. And so it's like when it happens, it's like you have to treat it. And it's like a lot of these deaths actually are preventable, because it's apparently in America, there's a lot of like Catholic hospitals and places. People are apparently like not as versed in ectopic pregnancies because of how
it's like a specialization almost.
Yeah. Like, I mean, it was like when I was reading this
educated.
study, it was just generically just said that. It just said other countries with like our healthcare system are taught it more openly, whereas like there's like weird privatized like Catholic hospitals or something that won't teach how to do this. Anyways, they're saying way more people are dying of ectopic pregnancies in America than Canada, for example. Okay. But right now it's like legally people are confused if they can even do the procedure. Like there's in between things right after Roe versus Wade has been overturned,
like,
where I'm like,
we allowed to?
I'm just saying like you can fight through the law right now, but what's already happened is so tragic and dangerous that people aren't sure if they can even treat people who have ectopic pregnancies.
Who
like,
might die.
How the hell did the
the
embarrassment of the Supreme Court, which it is right now, not think about that?
Yeah, like at the very least, put a caveat that says like, but ectopic pregnancy,
it's like no, you just
abortions are allowed.
And I think that's also what is like menacing. Is like now I'm freaking learning about the Supreme Court. It's like all that shit that Donald Trump did is like he did fuck their democracy, because it's like now I'm like, lol, the Supreme Court is a hijacked joke. I like, you know what I mean? If you start
even as
thinking
someone not from the country,
yeah.
being like, that's it's like, how can you
like you didn't think about ectopic pregnancies and you just did this thing and you're like, okay, like that's embarrassing and really scary.
Yeah, like read a book.
Also, another study in 2014 found that a quarter of the people who got abortions in America identified as Catholic, and 13% identified as evangelical Protestant. So it's
Say that again.
Oh, a study in 2014 found that a quarter of the people who got aborted. Again, this is a study, so they're like doing surveys, and it was like confidential. A quarter of the people were identified as Catholic and 13 identified as evangelical Protestant.
I had read something similar. It was like 30% of people in a certain, like, I didn't write this down, but were Christian.
Well, it's just sort of like sometimes there's like this religious, it's just like unfair for us to like be like, those religious people are anti-abortion. It's like, no, there's probably a lot of those religious people who are like trapped, and they, as we've seen, have gotten abortions because they're
I guess that's what can be frustrating to me. Also, you know, I have like grew up in a Catholic environment, so have a little bit of resentment towards like religion in a way that maybe you don't, because you grew up in like a healthy environment. I think it's frustrating because, and maybe this is my version of the boogie person on the other side, is like they only care when it affects them. I know that's not true.
What do you mean? What do you mean?
Like, the people are Christian and spouting that abortion's wrong until it happens to them, and they have the resources to do it. And that does that happens with healthcare too. It's people being like, "Why would I pay for these people who are not pulling themselves up by their bootstraps?" But as soon as they have they have cancer, oh my gosh! Like I'm so glad that I had like money to help me with my health. It's like, yeah, we should afford that to everyone. And it frustrates me seeing people who otherwise would be picketing, and you obviously these stories get highlighted in the media. It's like leopards ate my face. It's like people who were fighting for one thing and then it happens to them, and suddenly, like, you know how many freaking Republican Congress people probably have hooked up with and had to give their little side piece an abortion and don't blink twice about it.
You're looking at me and I'm like scared. I'm like, I'm not looking in your eyes. I'm not like
no, it's like it's just like they don't hold themselves to the same standards. I don't think. I think that's frustrating.
I know, and I think that is.
So I don't have said that.
No, you can have said that. I'm just like, I don't have that same type of thing because I don't know, like I don't know anyone.
Yeah.
I don't know any of those stories. So I'm just like, I can only imagine that's true, but I haven't, like, I don't read those. I don't go on Reddit. I don't get the intense information. Another thing that I think is frustrating and important to remember, so annoying that we just live in a frustrating time, but it's like, constantly science and statistics tells us that sex education is the only way for us to actually combat abortions.
Like if we want them to stop, we educate and support resources towards these issues,
towards unwanted pregnancies. And it's like
even contraception.
That's the thing that gets to me with the like, well, you were sort of talking about the anger and like, well, like your anger towards Catholic religion. What frustrates me about that is like, you can't be anti-abortion
and not support
and anti-contraception. It's like, what the hell? Like, to me, like everything starts falling apart, and it's like, you just hate women. Okay, like, well, you probably do, but like now I'm going crazy. Now I'm on Reddit. Now I'm on Reddit, typing on Reddit. But in 2009, Colorado began offering teens free IUDs without needing parental consent. Within 8 years, teen pregnancy dropped by 54% and teen abortion rates dropped by 64%.
Since what? Sorry? What was the first thing you said? I missed it.
In Colorado, they began offering teens IUDs without parental consent.
Okay.
So there you go. It's like, okay, like it's literally just giving people if you're so don't want abortions, which are going to happen no matter what. But the only way to combat it is to teach people about sex education, give them contraceptions, not have to, which I just feel like the people who are like, you know what I mean? Who want like wanting to make abortion illegal are for some reason also not wanting their kids to learn about sex openly and how, and like,
and there's a lot of shame around sex. It's like, well, you were a slut, you deserve it. It's kind of like that's the attitude.
It's like, do we need to have an abstinence episode? Because it's like, that doesn't work, people. Yeah, it's like we know that. Literally. We probably have to have an abstinence episode.
Yeah, like, well, the answer is it doesn't work, okay? Like,
I know, but people probably have their own...
I mean, when it comes to abortions and when it comes to like these things, obviously...
I'm actually writing it down because I want to know what people who preach abstinence, like, from a science standpoint, like what they could even think. I had read
something in one of these studies about places that promote abstinence first and their rates of abortion.
And it's just like, I know, but it's also just like, I want to know what the scientific attempts at a talking point for that other side would be. And it might not exist, but I'm curious. Like, you know what I mean? Like, abstinence is a good episode idea, I think.
Okay. Yeah.
After we do some light ones coming up.
Yeah.
Why don't we do one about sphincters, anal hole?
While you're doing that, something to piggyback off of what you said was since 2006, abortions have fallen by 26%. Want to know what happened in 2006?
Probably like sex education.
Plan B became over the counter in America.
Wow. So okay, we should talk about the difference between Plan B and like...
Yeah, Plan B does not work if fertilization has occurred. All it does is stop fertilization. So like it's sometimes a misconception that once the sperm's inside, you're getting pregnant. Sometimes it can be there for like days before the egg is maybe not fully released yet, or it's coming down. It depends on like which stage we are at in ovulation. So Plan B is basically like making that not happen. So the worry for some people, like it is not an abortion in any way, shape, or form because fertilization has not happened.
And also, I think another thing to get into is like, so much propaganda happens on the side of people trying to say that abortion should be illegal. And it's really unfair. Like when you think about the people like picketing and like the signs, it's like, so most of the abortions that are happening it's like an oral contraceptive. It's like, it's not this thing that everyone thinks it is. And it's like frustrating because it's like, that is now illegal. Like there are ways now that everyone's talking about how you can just send the medication to people. Like people are going to figure out ways for people to get this oral medication, but that is not even the way I ever thought of. Like, I didn't know that until we did our video about abortion. I always was picturing it as this like insane procedure, which it's not. Only 1.2% of abortions occur after 21 weeks. 1.2%. And so this oral tablet is effective 49 days from your last menstrual period. So most of the people who are having abortions are doing this. It has mifepristone and essentially just blocks progesterone, which causes the uterus to contract and the embryo is expelled as like a heavy period. So it's like that is now illegal.
Right.
Like that. It's like even just like that. It's like, oh my God. Like that's like all the people picketing and everything we're told, even in the media, is that's not what an abortion is. We're never told that.
Right.
And then 92% of legal abortions take place in the first 13 weeks of gestation. 92% first 13 weeks. Like it's frustrating too when you even think that. Like not that I've like seen those picketers signs, but like I have.
Yeah,
in,
yeah.
like,
Oh, yeah,
shows.
literally, yeah.
And I kind of look at the sign and I'm like, it's scary, and I'm just not going to look at that. But it's like
And
that's
you're like
not even
abusing young people is usually. I mean, actually, it's not just happening to young people. Like obviously, there are lots of older people who are getting abortions. But like it is just so sad to think of like you're attacking individuals like often at their like this goes back to the boogie woman and a boogie person where it's like that person obviously thought about going to an abortion clinic. Like it's not like they were just like, okay, time to go. Like people have to like contemplate, think about, are scared, are like stressed, are anxious for days, and it's just like you're going to go attack them with this image that they're just there flippantly as though they just like getting French fries.
Man?
Yeah, exactly.
There should be some law that they have to like, but no, but like I was like that they have to be there. It's like no, because in many cases they are abusive and you don't want them there.
Yeah.
So like never mind, that doesn't work. Mm-hmm. Also, apparently part of the Supreme Court thing was about pain. And so it was like 99% of abortions, 99% of them occur before the cortex is developed. And so like, although a fetus can have like a reflex, like if you put something in and touch it, like it'll move its hand away. If there's no cortex there, and it might even have pain receptors, it can't feel pain. Mm-hmm. So there's also this like weird way that they like tried to utilize pain in this Roe versus Wade thing, which is scientifically inaccurate because 99% of the abortions are happening before the cortex. And that 1.2% of abortions that are happening after that time, which this whole thing's based on and all those signs are based on, it's people who have found out that their fetus has like severe abnormalities, or that something's going to happen where they're going to die, or the kid is going to like be severely like have a horrible quality of life. You know what I mean? Like there's so much scientific and statistical evidence that's just like got dropped out of all of these like
and
concepts that it's like, what the hell?
Even I would say if those things aren't true, like of course, sorry, they are true. Even if there are some people having abortions because they want to, not because there's a severe abnormality, not because it's an ectopic pregnancy. Like it does come down to that conversation around bodily autonomy. And I know there's a lot of angles like everyone's trying to talk about this from. I don't know which is the best angle. That's why we're just kind of like talking about the science. But I have heard, obviously it is like every person deserves their own bodily autonomy. And I saw a good like not debate, but what would you say, like a talking point on this where somebody was like, no one deserves to have more autonomy over my body than myself, like regardless of if it means they die. So like if my kid needs my kidney to live, do I have to give it to them? No. That's my bodily autonomy, right? Like if you're the perfect donor to give somebody something, it's still your choice whether or not you do that. And I think like a woman gets to make that choice. Why should a fetus, even if we're saying it's can feel pain, it can feel whatever, like even in these extreme cases, why should it have more rights over this person's body than this person?
Holy fuck, that's so intense. And now I'm like even more depressed.
Why? Just because it's like...
No, it's just a really good point. And I'm just like, wow, like that shit's so depressing.
Yeah, no, it is
We have to go there tomorrow to America.
Oh, to America. I was like, go there.
No, I'm just like, should we just go to a protest? Like, I'm like, what else are we going to do over there? Are they happening? That's the other thing. I'm like, are there protests?
Yeah, I honestly
like hit
have been
the
like,
streets, people.
Yeah, people, I don't know. Like in the way that people were like, when gun laws weren't changed after all these kids died, like we knew it would never change ever. It's kind of like America. Like we're seeing Poland literally like protest like crazy over their abortion laws in the streets. I obviously am seeing some protests and stuff in America, but I kind of expected like a lot more, if I'm being honest.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think that's what's so sad and what's so menacing. It's people are exhausted.
Yeah, that's true.
Like I can't fault people for that. I still think hit the streets.
Yeah.
But I'm
and
like,
obviously it's like organized too. Like,
but-
not that hitting the streets isn't effective, but there are obviously lots of people actively trying to engage. Even if this becomes law, like what can they do going forward to keep people safe, to provide safe options, and then in the future move politically to make.
But it's like, I think it is like particularly menacing in America right now because of all the other aspects of their faulty society, like their lack of free healthcare. It's like in America, 14 out of 100,000 childbirths result in death. Like that's really, really sad. And that is not a statistic that occurs in places where there is universal healthcare. So now that statistic's going to become higher because people are now being forced to give birth. And for example, like an abortion procedure is so much more safe than having a kid in America. So it's just like the statistics of even that, the statistics of the fact that an abortion is 14 times, I actually can't even fathom it. The fact that giving birth is 14 times as dangerous as an abortion because of your healthcare system is so scary that like to be spending time to reverse these other things that are just going to make your already faulty healthcare system worse is like so menacing, because I think that's the scariest thing for America right now is that like there are things that need to happen. You need universal healthcare. You need to be taxing the rich to uplift the poor. You need to have a better education system. Like the world knows that. I don't know, maybe you don't know that, but like other people are watching and know that. But then the things that seem to be happening, even under a democratic leadership, are the opposite. Yeah. It's like it's hard. I think maybe even that's part of the reason, like what hitting the streets, like what, like when you start stacking up all the issues, it becomes harder and harder to understand what you're
like
even fighting for.
And how to make it.
Because then there's a shooting today on July 4th. Like, you know what I mean? Then all of a sudden,
planet's like literally on fire.
And now you're like, LA will probably light up in flames soon. And then you did this Supreme Court thing with EPA. It's like I want to go talk about climate change, but other people want to talk about this. Other people want to talk about guns. And it's just like all those things need to change. And for some reason, not only are they not changing, like other things are. So obviously the fight, is that even the right word? It seems like an intense word. Like there's more, like things are going to get better. Things are like, you know what I mean? Like things are going to change for the better, right? And people are going to take action like they are.
Yeah. I hope so. It does just feel like the last like 6 years have been hell. Well, in this kind of way. Like maybe it's because we're more blind to the progress of things that are happening, and maybe progress is slower and this is just a bump in the road.
And I do think with progress there's always backlash. Like I've always felt that way, and I haven't felt that same way about the last 6 years. Like I know it was like really hard for you, and it was obviously hard for me. Like I'm a Rosie O'Donnell fan, and, like, you know, I like obviously have hated Donald Trump since I saw him in Home Alone. Like I've hated the man forever. So there was a lot of reasons why that was exhausting. But I do think that there still are amazing things that are going to happen and are capable of happening. But I'm like, I just can't get this Roe versus Wade thing out of my head.
We're not
it's
in
so
America,
bad.
and there's a point where it's just like we do have to think about Canada, because these things are starting to happen here too. It bleeds in, and that's like part of me is worried and scared and being like, it's worth my effort more to focus on our own country. And honestly, like I know this is hyperbolic, but it like is very reminiscent of The Handmaid's Tale, and just like feeling like, and maybe 6 years isn't a lot.
What do you mean? Why?
Because in The Handmaid's Tale, like Canada is the place they're trying to escape to, and America has like slowly degenerated into like a Christian fascist regime. You know what I mean? And so it is just like seeing, and maybe this isn't what's happening, but it's like the beginnings of what that would look like. You know what I mean? Where like these religious ideals are starting to define a country that we have just said majority of people do not support.
No, I know. I'm always scared because when I think of The Handmaid's Tale, I'm like, that's inaccurate because there's no way the Canadian border would be able to hold up against America. I'm always like, they would just come on in and barge right through. And
but they might. Well, yeah, exactly.
But like, I'm just saying, like, I see what you mean. Like the Canada as the safe haven
that
thing.
If we don't focus on Canada and that is what's happening in America, then it can happen in Canada too. And that's why I'm like, I need need to be like very aware of what's happening. And
Yeah.
because like all these kind of extremist beliefs, which surely are inflamed by class division, you know what I mean? Like economic struggles, it's only getting worse. And then people hang on to like any of these extreme ideals because they think it's what will like save them.
It's also wild. It's like, get over your constitution, babe. Like, it's so
I know, it's like, aren't they called
funny.
amendments? Like, make another amendment.
And I'm like, they're
Amend
all
them
like,
again.
they're like, oh, we're actually like really good Supreme Court people because we're constitutionalists. I'm like, that's embarrassing. You're just
Yeah.
like, you're listening to the piece of paper that a bunch of like really scary white
so
men wrote,
long
like
ago.
so long,
and
long ago.
And even some of them, there's like quotes of them being like, these should be evaluated like every few decades.
Yeah,
Like, it's crazy.
I
to be
know.
like,
It's like that's not what they would have even wanted, and
yeah.
even they were probably really bad people. Like in today's standards, like everyone in the 1800s was.
Yeah.
But it's just wild because you're like, they keep talking about this Constitution, and then when you leave America, you're like, honey, babe, like it's not that big a deal.
I know. Oh, America.
I know, America, like, babe, you're sick.
We're all sick a little bit though, but like,
It's really interesting though. American, like even the most like lefty American, they still got it seeped into them. Like
know.
when we were living in LA for a while, I was just like, you know, this homelessness issue is like insane. Like we had just come from Mexico City, where from our, you know, ignorant trip, it was like Mexico City just looked like a much more thriving place than Los Angeles. Like it was just a note that we took. Like obviously we were living in LA for longer. There just was not obvious homeless people everywhere in the same way. And I brought that up to like truly a queer person at like a queer comedy show, and they couldn't take
Like,
it.
process
Like they
it,
or
yeah.
like they just I said literally like, you're sick. Like it was around the time of like when Bernie had just lost, and it was just like, you're so sick, America. Like you just need healthcare. And they all were like pro Bernie, but they still can't handle it because there's such an American, like the home of the brave vibe that they get.
like the best country. In the
Yeah,
world,
that we all watch from afar and we're like, lol, jokes. But like then when you're there, you're like, oh, they all grew up with this. Like there are things to be
Yeah.
proud of, and they can't. Like I think it's really hard for Americans to be told that they're suffering because that's not what they've been taught. They grew up in the
the whole
90s of Bill
ethos
Clinton
is
of
the
like
best country in the world.
yeah,
right?
like we are in charge of the world. And as that slowly slips away, which it is, they haven't been trained, I think, to like take that critique and make things better.
Yeah, and like I honestly want America to do well.
Me too.
You know, like from the outside in, like I don't like take pleasure in being.
No,
like,
I literally
'cause
like.
it's also really scary for us.
Yeah, no, I know, and like when like literally when Barack Obama, I was like, I love America. Like there's like it's like when America's like feels
Doing
like it's doing
well,
well, it's like
yeah.
all of a sudden
Like,
it's like
cheering you
I
on.
like hot dogs and I like baseball, but it's like now it's like oh no, and I always think about the Read, like the Read. One of my favorite podcasts, they always talk just about how they're like, this goddamn country, I gotta get out of it. And they've talked about how like that's like a really radical statement in and around America. I think it's becoming more normalized now. And I think Canadians are especially, that's like what we do. We're
Well,
like,
to be-
Canada sucks too.
Yeah, definitely not everyone here thinks that. Like people, but we have to like, yeah, we just like Canada Day just passed, and I actually do think less and less people are being like Canada Day. We're like being like, no, we're literally on stolen land that we murdered to like so many
Yeah.
people, and we need to actually like stop and acknowledge that we aren't this like perfect country that we thought.
I
we were,
really
like.
felt like no one was celebrating Canada Day.
Yeah, and it is an interesting to at least have those conversations and know that they're happening more and more frequent. And maybe they are in America too. Every year, maybe more people are like,
And I
we
think-
need to reevaluate this.
Yeah, and I think also in like a lot of like new immigrants to Canada, people who have maybe escaped situations and Canada has become a place for them where they now feel safe, are like celebrating Canada Day. But I think even like those people who I also follow are still like, but like,
still,
then they
yeah,
show up and they're like, oh, this
let's talk
indigenous
about the
land, like holy
genocide.
shit, yeah,
Yeah.
like you like,
can appreciate something and criticize it at the
Yeah,
same time,
yeah.
I think. Oh gosh, there was something I was going to bring up. What were we just talking about?
we're talking about kind of that like Americans like burning, but they're not the best at dealing with it.
Oh, America. I can't remember, but I am.
You
cheering
produced
on.
Rosie O'Donnell. You produced Broadway. I'm like, you're amazing. You're amazing. Michelle Obama.
And I have hope. I have hope that, all progress does wavelength. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Does like bounce
And
up
there's
and
the
down.
coolest fucking people in America. You know what I mean? Like, it's so freaking diverse. Like, there's so many brilliant people. Like, it is an amazing, amazing place where there are so many people who are not going to let this happen. It's just this is a big one. This Roe versus Wade overturning is just like a big blow.
Oh, I remember when I was going to say, like, the other day I was thinking about what will it feel like and when will I know I want to leave Canada? Like, if that happens. Like,
oh my God,
I was
Mitch,
like, no, because I just had to, I was like kind of putting myself in an American's shoes and being like, do they not see it?
No,
and
because you stay to fight.
I might, no, but like if Canada, like, there's like political parties in Canada would love to erase gay marriage here as well.
But where would you go?
Like Scandinavia.
Well, that's
I'm not saying
racist as that.
New Zealand.
They're not letting you in, hun.
Well, now that the pandemic's over, they might.
No, Mitch.
I've got family there. Greg,
no.
all I mean is there's lots of immigrants from other places to Canada that are escaping like countries that they deem as like that they think is bad. If Canada ever became a place, when would I know it was time to leave? That's what I'm asking myself. Like, yes, I'm not saying there's perfect countries in this world, but like if like gay marriage was reversed here, I would be like, this country is going in a really sad direction.
Yeah,
I know that's just one thing, and
it
hopefully
wasn't
I would
reversed
stay to
somewhere
fight.
else, you mean like?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And that's not like I'm not like a single issue voter on that, but it would matter to me.
We're not planning to get
We're
married,
not even getting
so it
married.
wouldn't affect us.
It would just mean something that like the political landscape had changed enough, and there's enough people to support that would make me sad to be living in this country.
Yeah,
As one example.
Yeah.
And
I've never thought of that.
yeah, it was just like imagining a world where what if like we're just seeing like some pretty extreme ideas and ideals popping up even in Canada.
Yeah.
That disturb me. Hopefully the majority of people who don't agree with those speak up loud enough to stop those things from happening. But seeing it happening in America where minority voices like of these like affluent, rich white people are making decisions that are going against popular opinion scares me.
Yeah, that's fair.
And so I just like was playing a little hypothesis or a little like imaginary.
No, I've never
in my
thought
mind.
about that. I'm like, I'm definitely not going to leave here because like.
But you might one day. What if like you never know? Countries change really fast, and hopefully our country remains stable. I don't know. It's just a little thought experiment.
Oh my god. Okay, well, we are planning
I'll give
to live to
one
Colombia
last
for 2 months.
Oh yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah. We have to bring this up earlier in the pod. If you're from Colombia, let us know.
Yeah, we're gonna
move there.
We're gonna move there for a bit.
I was going to end on a stat that was, well, there was 2 separate studies, but nearly all of women 5 years after having an abortion say it was the right decision. One study said 95% of women, and one study said 84%.
Yeah.
That they either like had positive feelings or none at all, and that they weren't traumatized because there's lots of
Oh yeah, I've read a study about that. That was like whether you have an abortion or not, it doesn't affect how like quote unquote depressed you become. Like,
yeah,
they've
the
tried to
idea that
make it
women like
seem
suffer emotionally
like not
for a
that's
long
not-
time from having an abortion.
Yeah, that's not the
that
case.
most women who did believe it was the right decision.
Or people.
Sorry,
This
yeah,
whole
most
time we
people.
said people with
Yeah,
vaginas.
sorry.
Oh my god. Okay. Wow. Next week we're gonna do something real lighthearted. Thank you everyone for listening.
Yeah.
Super curious people's opinion.
Yeah, this was long.
And yeah, there's not really that much else to say other than the science is not on the side of the Supreme Court.
Okay. Enjoy your life.
Peace.